Most people are afraid of silence. Not the silence of an empty room, but the silence inside themselves. That vast, hollow space where noise used to live. They fill it with music, with conversation, with endless scrolling, with plans that never begin and explanations that never end. They are afraid that if they stop talking, stop moving, stop reacting, they will discover there is nothing there. But the samurai knew something that the modern world has forgotten. The man who can sit in total silence, without flinching, without reaching for distraction, without needing to announce himself to the world. That man is the most dangerous person in any room he walks into. There is a concept in Japanese philosophy that has no direct translation in the English language. It is called Ma. Written with a single character, it represents the space between things, the pause between notes that gives music its meaning, the breath between words that gives speech its weight, the stillness between actions that gives a warrior his precision. Ma is not emptiness in the way the Western mind understands it. It is not absence. It is not lack. Ma is a living space. It is the silence that speaks. Ancient Japanese artists, poets, architects, and swordsmen all studied Ma with the same seriousness that a scholar studies text, because they understood that what is not there shapes everything that is. Miyamoto Musashi, the undefeated swordsman, the painter, the philosopher, the man who killed his first opponent at 13 and never lost a duel in his life, wrote in the Book of Five Rings that the warrior must understand emptiness as a state of readiness, not rest. He was not speaking metaphorically. He was describing a precise mental posture. In the moment before a duel, the swordsman who is full of fear, full of strategy, full of noise in his mind, that man is already defeated. But the swordsman who has cultivated emptiness, who has trained his mind to become still on command, who does not reach for thought but allows clarity to arise, that man strikes with the speed and certainty of water finding the lowest point. Musashi did not win 60 duels through aggression. He won them through emptiness. Consider a man named Daniel. He is 34 years old, works in a city, and by every measurable standard is doing fine. He has a job. He has a small apartment. He has people in his life who care about him, in the way that people care for one another when they are all too busy to truly be present. But Daniel has not been silent in 6 years. Not once. He wakes to an alarm, to notifications, to the low-grade anxiety of a day that has already begun without him. He eats while watching something. He commutes with headphones in. He works through noise. He sleeps with the television on because the silence of his apartment in the hours just before sleep feels too loud, too close, too honest. Daniel is not broken. He is ordinary. He is the average product of a world that has declared silence a problem to be solved. Somewhere in his mid-20s, he internalized the idea that productivity meant constant motion, that stillness was laziness, that a quiet mind was an unambitious one. He had learned to perform busyness the way a soldier learns to march, automatically without questioning where the march is leading. And yet beneath all of it, beneath the noise and the motion and the careful construction of a life that looked acceptable from the outside, Daniel felt something he could not name, a hollowness, not the hollowness of emptiness, but the hollowness of a man who has been running so long he has forgotten what he was running from. The moment that changed, Daniel came not in a dramatic form. There was no crisis, no collapse, no rock bottom. He was sitting in his car in a parking garage after work, and his phone had died. That was it. His phone had died, and for 20 minutes, he sat in near total silence with nothing to reach for. In those 20 minutes, Daniel experienced something that most adults in the modern world have not experienced since childhood. Unstructured, unmediated, quiet. And what he discovered was not peace, not immediately. What he discovered first was the noise that had been living inside him all along, the constant internal chatter he had been drowning out for years, the anxiety, the unfinished sentences, the low hum of dissatisfaction he had been outrunning since before he could name it. This is what the Zen masters call the first layer of silence. It is not pleasant. When a man finally stops moving, the things he has been running from do not disappear. They are still there, waiting with perfect patience, because they have nowhere else to go. The ancient teaching is clear on this point. You cannot skip this layer. The practitioner who sits in meditation for the first time does not find peace. He finds chaos. He finds every thought he has ever deferred, every emotion he has ever suppressed, every discomfort he has ever traded for distraction. This is the gate, and most people, when they reach it, reach immediately for their phone. Daniel did not have that option, so he sat, and without meaning to, without knowing what he was doing, he began. The samurai tradition has a phrase, Mushin. It is written with two characters, Mu, meaning no or without, and Shin, meaning mind or heart. Together they describe a state that is the goal of every serious practitioner of Zen-informed martial arts. Mushin is the mind without mind, the state of consciousness that is fully awake, fully present, fully capable, but utterly free of attachment to thought, outcome, fear, or desire. It is not a trance, it is not blankness. It is the highest form of alertness, achieved paradoxically through the complete release of effort. The swordsman in a state of Mushin does not decide where to strike. The strike happens through him, as naturally and inevitably as water flowing downhill. This concept was not reserved for the battlefield. The tea ceremony, one of the most precisely cultivated practices in Japanese culture, was understood by its greatest masters as a practice of Mushin in daily life. The preparation of tea, the movement of the hands, the arrangement of the bowl, the pouring of water, all of it performed in a state of complete, undistracted presence. Sen no Rikyu, the 16th century master who defined the philosophy of the tea ceremony, taught that the practice of tea was the practice of a life. He meant that the quality of attention a man brings to a bowl of tea is the quality of attention he brings to everything. A man who is somewhere else when he pours the water is somewhere else when he speaks to his son. He is somewhere else when he makes a decision. He is everywhere except where his life is actually happening. The samurai trained in tea ceremony with the same discipline they applied to the sword, because they understood that the stillness required to serve tea with perfect grace is the same stillness required to survive a duel. After the night in the parking garage, Daniel did something small. He began waking up 15 minutes earlier than necessary, not to exercise, not to journal, not to optimize, simply to sit in silence before the day began. He did not meditate in any formal sense. He did not light incense or adopt a posture. He sat at his kitchen table with no phone, no music, no television, and he allowed the morning to be quiet. The first week was uncomfortable in the way that stretching a muscle that has been contracted for years is uncomfortable. Not painful, exactly, but deeply unfamiliar. His mind produced an extraordinary amount of noise. To-do lists, old conversations, half-formed anxieties about things that had not happened and probably would not. He did not try to stop any of it. He simply sat with it, the way a man sits beside a river without trying to stop the water. By the third week, something had begun to shift. It was not dramatic. He did not feel enlightened, but he noticed in small ways that his reactions during the day were slower, that when a colleague said something dismissive, he did not respond immediately. He felt the impulse to respond, observed it, and let it pass. He noticed that in meetings, while others spoke quickly, filling every silence with more words, he had begun to feel comfortable waiting before he spoke. And when he did speak, something had changed in the way people received his words. He had not become louder. He had not become more aggressive or more confident in any performed sense. He had simply become more still. And stillness, it turned out, had a weight to it that no amount of noise could match. Let us be precise about what is meant when we say that silence makes a man dangerous. It is not danger in the violent sense, though in the historical context of the samurai, physical application was certainly part of it. The danger of the silent man is this: he cannot be manipulated through noise. The great majority of influence, social, political, commercial, interpersonal, operates through noise. It operates through urgency, through the manufacturing of anxiety, through the constant suggestion that you must react now, decide now, speak now. Because if you do not, something will be lost. The man who has cultivated silence has, in a very real sense, diffused this mechanism. He is no longer governed by the rhythm of other people's urgency. He moves at his own pace, from his own center, and nothing that comes at him from outside can change that pace unless he allows it to.
लेकिन एक समुराई के लिए यही अभ्यास है, क्योंकि नियंत्रण एक्शन में नहीं, एक्शन से पहले होता है, और जो उस एक क्षण को पकड़ लेता है वो अपनी पूरी जिंदगी को बदल देता है। पानी जब बहता है तो वो हर खाली जगह को भर देता है। आग जब जलती है तो वो हर विराम को निगल जाती है। लेकिन एक योद्धा उन खाली जगहों को बचाता है, क्योंकि वहीं उसकी शक्ति है। तुम्हें प्रैक्टिस करनी होगी, हर दिन, बिना गैप के। हर प्रतिक्रिया से पहले पॉज, हर निर्णय से पहले क्लैरिटी, हर डिस्ट्रैक्शन से पहले अवेयरनेस। न्यूरोसाइंस कहता है तुम्हारा दिमाग पैटर्न्स बनाता है, और हर बार जब तुम बिना सोचे रिएक्ट करते हो तुम अपनी कमजोरी को मजबूत करते हो। लेकिन हर बार जब तुम रुकते हो तुम नया पैटर्न बनाते हो। धीरे धीरे तुम्हारा दिमाग बदलता है, और एक दिन वो विराम तुम्हारी आदत बन जाता है। यही है मास्टर सी। एक समुराई युद्ध से पहले जीत तय करता था। वो सोचता नहीं था देखेंगे क्या होगा, वो पहले ही तय कर लेता था अगर ये हुआ तो मैं ऐसा करूंगा। इसे कहते हैं प्री डिसाइडिंग। तुम्हें भी यही करना होगा। अगर तुम जानते हो कि तुम डिस्ट्रैक्शन में गिरते हो तो पहले ही तय करो, जब मैं फोन उठाऊंगा मैं सिर्फ 5 मिनट दूंगा। अगर तुम जानते हो कि तुम गुस्से में कंट्रोल खो देते हो तो तय करो, जब मैं ट्रिगर होऊंगा मैं 3 सेकंड रुकूंगा। ये छोटे निर्णय तुम्हारी पहचान को शेप करते हैं। एक रोनिन हर लड़ाई से पहले अपनी हार के रास्ते बंद कर देता था। तुम भी ऐसा ही करो, ताकि जब पल आए तुम्हें सोचने की जरूरत ना पड़े, तुम पहले से तय हो। एक दिन ऐसा आएगा जब तुम वही इंसान नहीं रहोगे। तुम रिएक्ट नहीं करोगे, तुम चुनोगे। तुम भागोगे नहीं, तुम ठहरोगे। तुम नॉइज में खोगे नहीं, तुम खामोशी को सुनोगे। और उस दिन तुम समझोगे सच कभी दिखता नहीं था, वो हमेशा बीच में था। हर पॉज में, हर खालीपन में, हर उस पल में जिसे तुमने पहले नजरअंदाज किया। एक आखिरी रोनिन की तरह तुम भी अब समझ जाओगे, तलवार नहीं जीतती, वो क्षण जीतता है जब तुमने खुद को नियंत्रित किया। और वही क्षण तुम्हें वो बना देता है जिससे तुम्हारा पुराना स्वरूप डरता था। अगर ये दर्शन तुम्हारे अंदर कुछ जगाता है तो इस रास्ते पर आगे बढ़ो। सब्सक्राइब करो द लास्ट रोनिन को, जहां हम जापान के बुशीडो और वाबी साबी के रास्ते पर तुम्हारी पहचान को तराशते हैं।
There came a point in Daniel's practice when the silence stopped being uncomfortable and began being informative. This is the second layer that the Zen masters describe. The place beyond the initial chaos, where what arises in the silence is no longer random noise but something more precise, something that can be listened to. In this second layer, a man begins to hear the difference between thought and knowing. Thought is the noise, the planning, the rehearsing, the justifying, the worrying. Knowing is something quieter and deeper, something that does not arrive through argument, but through stillness. Most men never reach this layer because they cannot tolerate the first one long enough to pass through it. For Daniel, what arrived in the silence was not comfortable. What arrived was clarity about the ways he had been dishonest, not with others, but with himself. The career path he had chosen because it was expected rather than because it was true. The relationships he had maintained out of familiarity rather than genuine connection. The version of himself he had been performing for so long that he had begun to believe the performance was the man. This is the internal duel that the samurai tradition speaks of, not the duel with an external opponent, but the far more demanding duel with the self. Musashi's greatest battles, by his own account, were not fought in the open air with a sword. They were fought in silence, alone, over the course of decades, as he systematically dismantled every illusion he held about himself and built something cleaner in the space that remained. 6 months after that night in the parking garage, Daniel was not a different person. This is important to understand, because transformation in the popular imagination tends to involve becoming something new, a more powerful version, a rebuilt self, a person who has transcended who they were. What actually happened to Daniel was the opposite. He became more precisely and more completely himself. The noise, the performance, the reflexive reactivity, these had not been him. They had been accumulations, layers laid down over years in response to a world that rewarded noise and penalized stillness. When those layers were removed, through the patient and unglamorous practice of sitting in silence every morning and practicing restraint throughout the day, what was left was quieter, more certain, and harder to move. The people around Daniel noticed the change before he fully articulated it to himself. His words had become fewer and therefore more considered. His presence in a room had acquired a quality that is difficult to describe. Not dominance, not aggression, not the loud confidence of a man who needs to be noticed. Something more like gravity. He had become a man around whom other people were inclined to quiet themselves, not because he demanded it, but because his stillness made their own noise feel slightly unnecessary. This is what the samurai traditions pointed toward when they spoke of the warrior who has mastered himself. Not a man who has become fearsome, a man who has become still enough to be completely, undeniably present, and in that presence, to exert an influence that no amount of noise can replicate. What the samurai knew, and what the modern world has largely forgotten, is that silence is not the absence of power, it is the accumulation of it. Every moment a man resists the urge to fill a silence with unnecessary words, he adds to a reserve. Every morning he sits without distraction, he deepens a capacity. Every conversation in which he listens completely rather than waiting for his turn to speak, he sharpens a perception. These are not metaphors. They are the actual compounding consequences of a disciplined practice, and they are available to any man willing to accept the discomfort of the early stages. The instruction is simple, though simplicity should not be confused with ease. Sit in silence every morning. Begin with 5 minutes. Let the noise come. Do not try to stop it. Simply watch it as a samurai watches an opponent, without fear, without attachment, without flinching. Extend the practice outward. Speak less. Before any response, allow one full breath. Not as a technique, not as a performance of composure, but as a genuine pause in which you ask whether what you are about to say is necessary, true, and precisely what you mean. Begin to notice the things in your life that consume your attention without returning anything of value, and remove them, one by one, without drama and without announcement. The philosophy of Ma does not ask you to empty your life of meaning. It asks you to empty it of everything that is not meaning, so that what remains can fill the available space completely. The way a single flower in a Japanese vase fills a room more fully than a dozen flowers crowded together. Throughout history, in every culture that has valued genuine power over performed power, the accounts are consistent. The men and women who changed the course of events, who moved through the world with lasting effect, who were trusted when it mattered most. They were almost never the loudest ones in the room. They were the ones who had done the internal work, who had sat with the silence long enough to know themselves, who had nothing to prove and nothing to perform, and whose words therefore landed with the weight of things that had been carefully considered rather than carelessly released. The samurai tradition did not celebrate silence because silence is peaceful. It celebrated silence because silence is productive, because the empty mind perceives more clearly than the full one, because the man who does not speak unnecessarily is the man whose words are heard, because stillness is not the opposite of strength, it is the source of it. Musashi, at the end of his life, retreated to a cave called Reigando and wrote the Book of 5 Rings in the final weeks before his death. He was 72 years old, undefeated and alone. In the cave, in the silence, he set down everything he had learned across a lifetime of combat, art, philosophy, and practice. The final book he wrote was called The Book of the Void, a meditation on emptiness as the highest principle of all. He wrote simply that within the void is virtue and no evil. Wisdom exists, logic exists, the way exists, and the spirit is the void. Daniel still wakes 15 minutes early. He still sits at his kitchen table without his phone. He does not speak about the practice because the practice has taught him that the things worth keeping do not require announcement. He is not finished. He is not enlightened. He is a man who has learned to sit with his own silence, and in that silence, he has found something that no noise was ever capable of providing, a foundation that does not move.